Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. At least if you're watching here in the United States of America, it's Independence Day. I want to just take a few minutes kind of to share from my heart a few things. I really feel like this is for you. If you're watching this is for you. Don't tune me out. Don't scroll. Tune in for a minute here because something really important is happening right now. I've actually, and I just want to share with you, I typically am not a reader. I've said this before. I'm not typically a reader, even though I'm an author. I've written a book. I typically am not a reader, but I've been reading a book that has, honestly, it's captivated my attention. I love history in general, but this book, this book right here, it's called 1776, written by an author by the name of David McCullough, who's just a fantastic historian. He writes historical. It's kind of like fiction, but it's not fiction. I mean, it's actually, all of this is just citations and quotes from history. It's all true. So it is fascinating, this book. It's really captivated me. And let me tell you why, really quick, why it's captivated me. I've grown up knowing the story of how the country was formed, the Revolutionary War, the War of Independence, becoming independent of Great Britain, forming of the new Republic of the United States. I've known the tertiary or the idea of that or the general facts of that, but I've never, this book, 1776 with David McCullough, really goes into the intimate details of the back and forth, the letters that were written, what people were thinking, the conditions on the ground. And let me just tell you, I really have no idea. I have zero idea how these people, the folks who declared their independence from Great Britain, I have no idea how they pulled it off. I really don't. I'm reading the details. It was a lost cause. They had no military. Great Britain was the mightiest empire on the earth. There was no physical explanation. There is no way they could have beaten the greatest, most powerful empire on the face of the earth to form their own independent country. I'm reading the facts. I'm reading about what happened. I still don't know how they did it. And here's what's crazy. They didn't even know how they did it. But what's inspiring about it? Again, now, I know these weren't perfect people. Their society wasn't perfect. They were products of their society. But they did start to clue into something, right? And without rehashing all the details, I don't want to give you a history lesson today because that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is about your life. But what I find inspiring about these people who lived in 1776, who declared their independence from this oppressive empire called Great Britain at the time, is that they were tapped into something deep inherent in humanity, which is that we are sovereign beings who cannot be given freedom because we are free. They tapped into that and they declared their freedom, their independence, with simply intention. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the force, the power, the institutions of the day, the militaries of the day. They had none of it. When they formed their ragtag army, it's really a stretch to even call it an army. They were not trained. They didn't even have weapons half the time. They had nothing. And the British counterparts had everything. They had training. They had weapons, the highest caliber weapons of their day. They had everything. But what these colonists had was an intention for freedom. That's literally all they had. Even when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, it was just words on a paper backed by an intention. It wasn't backed by a military, really. It was just backed by intention. And yet that force, that energy was sufficient enough to overthrow the most oppressive and largest empire of that day. And I have to be completely honest with you, as I'm reading this book, I see so many parallels to our day today. See, even in 1776, the folks who wanted to be independent, they were not in the majority. We have this idea of history that all the colonies were united and everybody wanted to be an independent country and overthrow Great Britain. That's not the case. They were a small group of people. They were called the Patriots. They were not the majority. The majority of folks And a lot of places were called Tories. They were called Tories because they wanted to be loyal to the crown, to the British crown. They wanted to be loyal to Great Britain. They did not want independence, and those were the majority in most places around the country. So these patriots weren't even the majority. They were a small group of people that had a vision of being free, of being ruled over. They had a vision of being free to live their life from these certain inherent truths, self-evident truths. That's all they had. Didn't have military, barely. Didn't have the weaponry. Didn't have money. Didn't have almost anything. But they had an intention and clarity of vision. There's a lot of parallels to 2024. You see, I'm inspired today, and I want to see if you would be inspired today as well. It's July 4th, it's Independence Day, but I just want to use this as an occasion to call us, not everybody, maybe a smaller group of people, nevertheless, to call us to declare our independence. Independence from what? Well, like the folks back in 1776 who were facing a oppressive empire in some ways of Great Britain, we too have our own empire that I think we can make a strong case that it's pretty oppressive, right? We're in the midst of an empire, a culture that is polarized, that they are very committed to warfare. Even in our political discourse, Republican versus Democrat, people just at odds, especially now in an election year, people tearing each other down, thinking that's actually a message for the people to disparage, ridicule, talk about how bad the other party is, right? This is a culture of violence, a culture of division, a culture of polarization and conflict. Us versus them, Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus progressive, good versus evil, right? I don't know about you, but I am declaring independence of that culture. That is not me. And I invite you to declare your independence of that culture. You're free of it. You can be free of it. You don't have to participate with it. That's the first area of independence that I'm declaring, and I'd like to ask you to do that as well. The second area of independence I'd like to ask you to make is to be independent, to declare your independence of a culture, an empire that's built upon poisoning its people with toxic food and water and disease. I'm declaring my independence of participating in a culture where healthcare is seen as pharmaceutical drugs forced upon the people, and yet our water and food is poisoned. We can declare our independence of that by committing to finding food, eating food, taking care of our body, eating clean food, sourcing our food from a different source altogether. It is possible. You don't have to participate in the fast food culture, in the processed food culture. You can be independent of that. Third thing I want to ask us to be independent of is a culture that is committed to fear and poverty, thinking about things from this impoverished and fearful place that is easily manipulated because of fear tactics and poverty tactics. I am declaring independence of being a part of a culture that is just committed to survival and overwork and striving in fear. I'm committing myself to be a part of a culture that prioritizes abundance, first internally and then externally, that prioritizes adding value to the world around us, that prioritizes living from a place of rest and ease, not fear and disease and franticness and striving. See, there's a large group of people that are declaring their independence from this two-party polarized system, from this culture of sickness and disease, and just turning to pharmaceutical drugs in the name of healthcare, and yet not sourcing food from a better place, not taking their own health in their control. See, there's a group of people that are taking the power back into their own hands. And I would ask you to declare your independence, to be a peacemaker, to declare your independence, to become the healthiest version of yourself by sourcing your food and your water from non-toxic sources. And number 3, to be committed to a life of inner well-being and abundance, so that we can create businesses and a society from inner well-being and abundance, not fear and survival. Declare your independence today. Join me and so many others in becoming independent. We can, with that intention, overcome the most oppressive empire that exists in our day. And we can form a new world within ourselves, within our own individual lives, and eventually in a culture.